Tonight's event is one in a series of programs that we've organized in conjunction with our current exhibition at Artist Space, a survey of the work of German filmmaker and writer Hito Steyerl. One of the key considerations in forming the series of events was to expand on the more discursive elements of Steyerl's work, which includes her writing, her lectures, and her dialogues with other artists, writers, and thinkers. So we're very pleased tonight to welcome Metahaven, which will present a new lecture titled After Effects. The talk will address geopolitics, internet, and propaganda, specifically considering how contemporary, quote, ideological twists and turns are not located in geopolitical protocols, but in the infrastructure, hardware, and software that are used to bring these to a global audience. Following this, we'll be joined by writer Joanne McNeill and artist and writer Melanie Gilligan, each of whom will give responses to the concerns outlined in After Effects, while also taking in aspects of their own work. And after those short talks, we'll have a brief discussion and be able to take questions from the audience. Metahaven is a studio for design, research, and art based in Amsterdam and founded by Vinke Kroek and Daniel van der Velden. In March 15 with Sternberg Press, it published Black Transparency, The Right to Know in the Age of Mass Surveillance, which engages transparency's connections to design, architecture, and pop culture. Recent solo exhibitions include Islands in the Cloud at MoMA PS1 and Black Transparency at Bureau Europa Maastricht, both 2013. In the same year, the studio was also awarded the biannual Cobra Art Prize, and Icon magazine distinguished Metahaven with its Design Studio of the Year award. Joanne McNeill is a writer based in New York. She is currently a 2015 fellow at the Cal and Marilyn Thoma Art Foundation, where she received the Arts Writing Fellowship Award to an emerging writer in digital arts. McNeill is a contributing editor for The Message, the technology-focused opinion magazine published by Medium. She was recently an artist in residence at IBEAM and is formerly the editor of rhizome.org. Her writing has appeared in catalog essays and the 2014 publication Art and the Internet, published by Black Dog Publishing, and in numerous journals and magazines, including Domus, Frieze, Wired, and N+1. Melanie Gilligan is an artist and writer based in New York and London. Her work in art and filmmaking commands an imaginative and skeptical view of the political and personal effects of finance and technology, and the abstract power that these forces represent in the lives of people. Distinct from rehearsed dystopian technological narratives as seen in film and television, Gilligan's work specifically addresses how affect, emotion, and insecurity become fertile grounds for capitalization by a techno-scientific superstructure that hides its own objectives in promotional pitches, sales targets, and algorithms. The Common Sense, Gilligan's latest episodic video work, is a three-part project presented across multiple institutions. The final installment is presently on view at De Appel Art Center, Amsterdam. Following exhibitions at Casco Office for Art, Design, and Theory in Utrecht and Die Hallen, Haarlem. Previous solo exhibitions include Chisenhale Gallery in London, Kölnischer Kunstverein in Cologne, the Banff Center in Banff, Canada, and Gallery Max Meyer in Düsseldorf. Gilligan's critical writing on art, politics, and economies has appeared in publications such as The Market, published by Whitechapel, and Immaterial Economies, published by Philip, as well in journals and magazines, Grey Room, Art Forum, Text zur Kunst, and Mute Magazine. So now I'll give the mic over to Daniel to begin After Effects. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. The reason that we were a late start was that I was in a cab, and it was the cab driver's first ever drive. So I had to basically guide him through New York. Yeah, okay. So that went okay, but it was just a bit last minute. All right. So thanks for the intro, Nico, and thanks also very much for coming, Joanne and Melanie. we thought at Metahaven that it would be really great if we would invite two of our heroes to co-present with us and to have a little discussion, as Metahaven is trying to venture slowly into the art of filmmaking, entirely uneducated to do so, hoping that a graphic design background that is by now no longer really about graphic design, let's be honest. So forget about that design prizes that we won, that's not relevant. Also, it doesn't mean anything, you get this sort of symbolic sculpture. Anyway, so that we worked together a little bit with Melanie for the shows that she has in Holland. So we did some work around a website for that, and we're still doing that. So that's how we met. And of course, we knew her work from before, and we were incredibly interested in having this kind of dialogue that we already have going on in our mind, I think, in some way. And of course, Joanne McNeil as a continuing force in the sort of techno and art overlap that produces these sort of really interesting thoughts and outcomes as we continue to think about the role, of technology, etc. That said, these are some fragments and things from a developing series of films called The Sprawl. And After Effects is the sort of ideological manifesto in becoming of this series that will come out on the BBC iPlayer and YouTube in summer of this year. So you'll see some material that will, eventually reappear in some form in the Sprawl. This is a Russian supermodel who suicided in New York, Ruslana Korshunova. And it's not necessarily her, it's a screensaver of her, where she keeps reappearing. Nothing like a nice Russian dashcam video of a meteorite going over the Ural Mountains. The emerald-colored hot zone senses the image that is seen. It's a solar panel where reality shifts from one state into another, just like light gets converted into electricity. And this solar panel is the image sensor of the Blackmagic camera. All right, now I can't see anything. That's great. How to solve that way? All right, well, this is just a little bit premature to show this. Okay, this is the solution. In the long wake of the Allied invasion of Iraq in 2003, there are many consequences through which we are now still living. It may be felt as a bit of an old hat by now, but it is worth revisiting how the Bush and Blair administration struggled and managed, each in their own way, to get away with an all-out war over weapons of mass destruction that everyone knew Saddam Hussein didn't have. Most certainly, the US and the UK were keen to believe their own geofictions when they presented a set of forged documents as evidence of Saddam purchasing uranium in Niger. The documents, which I won't show here, but they're available online, were typed up in pompous-sounding quasi-French and crowned by 1010-style mastheads. CNN reported that they were so bad that they simply couldn't have been produced by any Western intelligence agency. They were an early analog form of After Effects. And after this, in our current geopolitical predicament, design or game plan, it gets often misunderstood where we are. When UK Prime Minister David Cameron stated in March 2015 that the West should be prepared to act if Putin's Russia was to, quote, rip the rule book of the 21st century, Cameron showed an acute disregard for the valid question of whether such a rule book actually exists. It is more likely that the former rule book is now a geopolitical VR helmet, a virtual reality helmet, overlapping ideological and self-referential worlds, making overlapping claims to the same spaces and territories in complete mutual disregard. So as a consequence, the many enemies that the liberal international order has acquired have in some way all joined forces in its subversion, though their alliance runs through different ideological and physical borders. Let's get acquainted with some of them.
Did CNN edit out criticism of its network during an interview with RT anchor Anissa Naoué? CNN anchor Christiane Amanpour was interviewing Naoué about whether or not RT and Russian media in general is helping to advance Vladimir Putin's aggression toward Ukraine. Here's a clip.
Do you feel that Russia Today and other state-sponsored media is specifically designed to counter what your government, your president believes is a bad image problem, an unfair shake in the West?
Just to be clear, he's not my president. I'm an American. He's the Russian president. And Russia Today airs to a global audience. So it's not really watched in Russia. It's in English.
In all, the interview posted by CNN was 9 minutes and 30 seconds on air and online. But what the viewers of the program did not see was a wild exchange where Naoué called out Amanpour for towing the State Department line for some 15 years. While CNN did not air it, RT was recording on Anissa's end. Here's what was said.
Certainly at Russia Today, we always try to show both sides of the story. Do we show more of a Russian perspective? Of course we do, because that's the perspective that's being sidelined. But it's an absurd question coming from someone that's propagated the line of the State Department for over 15 years. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. You've propagated the line of the State Department for over 15 years, starting with Yugoslavia and all the way into Syria. And now you're doing it for Ukraine, essentially. Absolutely, I'm talking to you. I've seen lots of your reports, and in not one report will you find you questioning the United States government and their policy. And we, with our Russian propaganda, question those arms to the FSA, question those arms to al-Nusra and other links. And now today, we have ISIS. But your audience should be aware of this.
Right. So we shouldn't forget that the press went with that Iraq war, and in the wake of it, it's arguably an outfit like RT, Russia Today, the Kremlin-sponsored television and internet channel, that benefits the most from the obliteration of truth that happened then. And after RT's embrace of WikiLeaks and Occupy Wall Street, it has become the sole mass media outlet to give substantial airtime to the so-called Western dissidents who are criticizing liberal democracies from within. And simultaneously, their slogan is question more, and it takes that masthead literally, in the sense that it aggressively takes at anybody's ability to establish a sense of objective truth amidst the fog of war. RT's media strategy, as we just saw, has something akin with art, and it has something akin with the media critique that we recognize from Chomsky to Farokhi. Yet, like a thief in the night, RT steals from us the geopolitical coordinates of what we used to call home. Like a political hallucinogenic, a Fox News for the disenfranchised critics of the liberal empire, it unsettles the Google Map spins of our territorial and ideological imaginaries. It may all be part of Putin's propaganda energy drink. Kremlin critics like Anne Applebaum, who have conveniently broadcasted anti-Russian and anti-Soviet narratives regardless of who was in power, in open association with lobby groups and think tanks, see in it merely the planetary scale computation continuation of the deceitful and treacherous mafia state that they've always diagnosed. What matters about Russian propaganda, myth-making and confusion is its psychological structure, its dazzling plot, adding to what we here are calling the after effects, in self-conscious accord with the Adobe software that video makers use to smoothen their work with visual effects. And here's an example of such an after effect.
Произошел переворот, власти захват вооруженный к массовой крови привел беспредел антиконституционный. Мы не имеем морального права перед людьми быть в стороне. Наша задача наладить работу прокуратуры в этой стране. Власть, кровь, няш, мяш, кровь, власть, Крым наш. Власть, кровь, няш, мяш. Няш, мяш, Крым наш. Няш, мяш. Произошел переворот, власти захват вооруженный к массовой крови привел беспредел антиконституционный. Мы не имеем морального права перед людьми быть в стороне. Наша задача наладить работу прокуратуры в этой стране. Няш, мяш, Крым наш. Няш, мяш.
So the Yale professor, history professor Timothy Snyder has called Russians' approach to geopolitics applied postmodernism. And this is an example where the subversive power and the emotional power is on the side of what is actually propaganda, but it's propaganda in a form that is so new and so seductive that it's hard to decipher on the terms that we traditionally understand propaganda to operate. And of course, the real standoff is not between Russia and US, for example. It's really the US, the standoff is between the US and China, and the real standoff is probably, and this is also something Snyder says, between the EU and Russia. Anyway. So why does then something like RT matter? If the high-stakes games over the world's current and future economic resources, from big data to rare earths, from fossil fuels to platinum asteroids, from Antarctica to the moon, are between the US and China, isn't Russia's RT, with its anchors and YouTube fame, merely battling over the leftovers? That may be, but RT matters because, and the Russian propaganda matters because its game, like that of an ideology or religion, is not territorially bound. It is a game over a concept, over an idea, the idea of truth. So that idea of applied postmodernism sheds light on this policy being a philosophical exercise brought to affect the reality of geopolitics. And recently, Peter Pomerantsev has further extrapolated such views in his book, Nothing is True and Everything is Possible, which, with back praise from Anne Applebaum, surveys the free fall of the Russian geopolitical imaginary through a series of dazzling stories about novel-writing Kremlin media strategists and suicidal supermodels. And Edward Snowden, who revealed the way that liberal democracy deals with privacy, is now a resident of Russia. Many of the most fervent critics of Western governance seem to have since moved on to academia and other careers or elsewhere, but at the same time, new actors have entered the stage. Authors such as Gabrielle Coleman have described to detail the emergency in the second half of the 2000s of a new type of digital insurgent under the portmanteau of Anonymous. Coleman ascribes a game-like sequential logic to the waves with which Anonymous announces itself, launches actions like DDoS attacks, and then recedes into obscurity only to reform and sequel again later. Like WikiLeaks and its contemporaries and predecessors, Anonymous is rooted in a set of pervasive ideas about the anarcho-libertarian character of networks and their technology. This outlook was, sooner or later, bound to forge new ties between the libertarian right and the anarchist left, groups that share contempt for and disbelief in the explanatory frameworks and ideological mindsets of the modern state. In the US, the firm Defense Distributed, led by Cody Wilson, has designed and put into circulation plans for 3D printable firearms. Nominally, Defense Distributed attacks both the state's monopoly on violence as well as the economic monopoly enjoyed by the arms manufacturing business. Its first model, the Liberator, is a pistol capable of firing a single shot before reload, but Defense Distributed has since continued to produce a 3D print component that can be assembled with an automatic rifle. In Europe, the programmer Amir Taki has taken upon himself the task of equipping the Bitcoin digital cryptocurrency with an anonymized payment system named Dark Wallet. The rationale behind Dark Wallet is to remove financial transactions in their entirety from the oversight by the state and banks. Predictably, Taki has been accused of developing a tool that could aid and abet terrorists, emphatically Islamic State. Taki has defended his work by stating that technology should benefit everyone and is in a sense objective. Now Wilson and Taki have joined forces in the Unsystems group together with Vitalik Buterin, a Russian programmer who has created Ethereum, a distributed, centralist operating system that administers contracts. Buterin is backed by a $100,000 stipend from dot-com billionaire Peter Thiel, who previously invested in Facebook, PayPal, and in the crypto-libertarian ocean colony seasteading. These developments should not be read or interpreted in isolation as a band of lone wolf revolutionaries who rejoice in garage experiments against the state. Rather, they should be seen in their broad sense of allegiance, not of goals, but of methods in the undercutting and hollowing out, perceived or real, of the framework of the Western democratic state, somehow in conjunction with the overlay of the Westphalian state grid by digital networks, 24/7 computing, video, and social media. The permanent overlay of the cloud. Indeed, planetary scale computation, seen here with the Earthrise image, in all its forms and functions, from network to hardware to software, sets the scene for a visual regimen of After Effects. Software has a manual that nobody reads. The rulebook of the 21st century could well be an After Effects tutorial video that may or may not be accompanied by a sermon from the Quran.
هذا المصمم العملاق 4000 جيجا.
نعرف أصحاب شهادات لم يجدوا وظائف ولم يجدوا مرتبات، ونعرف من لا يقرأ ولا يكتب أنعم الله عليهم وصب عليهم من البركات. السر: وأمر أهلك بالصلاة واصطبر عليها لا نسألك رزقا نحن نرزقك. جاء أحدهم إلى أحد الصالحين يشتكي ارتفاع الأسعار والأثمان. قال الصالح: والله ما أبالي لو أن حبة الشعير بدينار، علي أن أعبده كما أمرني وعليه أن يرزقني كما وعدني. علي أن أعبده كما أمرني وعليه أن يرزقني كما وعدني. وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون، ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون. السر: وأمر أهلك بالصلاة واصطبر عليها لا نسألك رزقا نحن نرزقك والعاقبة للتقوى. لما تنزل قول الله جل في علاه على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: فخلف من بعدهم خلف أضاعوا الصلاة واتبعوا الشهوات فسوف يلقون.
Yeah, this goes on for 40 minutes. So we'll have to excerpt a little bit, but this is so beautiful because this is a story about Prophet Muhammad who encounters the archangel Gabriel on the mountain, and it's put over this story or this visual where he's just copying terabytes after terabytes of files. And the same guy also has a bunch of After Effects and Cinema 4D tutorials with a similar sort of dreamlike feel. So here we see, especially in that first image, we see a kind of idea of a sort of recruiting
هذا المصمم
weaponization of
العملاق
software.
4000 جيجا.
So this is not a fundamentalist video or anything, but that icon, just that one icon, we really love.
هذا المصمم العملاق
So
4000
that is a Western digital mobile hard drive surrounded by all the icons of the software. Yeah, so that tells you something about how cinematic we're becoming. In After Effects, the computational overlay steps up from social media, from the smartphone, to the pocket cinema camera. If Al-Qaeda was akin to Hitostyle's poor image, the degraded JPEG or third-generation enlargement of a pixelated wasteland, the underlit mini-megapixel from the cavernous rocks of Tora Bora, then Islamic State, RT, and their contemporaries have stepped up their game. Even Dark Wallet is promoted with a full HD video that shares the overtones of a Blackmagic camera and the visual overlay of After Effects. Blackmagic is an Australian make of video cameras that has emerged from the world of post-production. The company first became known for purchasing a software manufacturer specialized in the digitization of celluloid film. And since, Blackmagic has released a range of video cameras known for their ability to record in low-light circumstances. They're zoomed in, tightly framed, deep images, and they're all over feel of cinematic output. And the visual tropes that have come with the distribution of such cameras along the general public can be seen at play in anything from Islamic State beheading videos, where from multiple viewpoints and with professional audio, an archaic fantasy narrative is carried out to cinematic precision. And After Effects, or what am I saying? Blackmagic even promotes the pocket cinema camera as a camera that is specially designed to film conflicts and wars. So it actually takes over from the smartphone, which previously was the sort of eyewitness to all these conflicts and these kind of dramatic moments. And now this pocket cinema camera is branded to replace that. So this all necessitates the reading that some of the most dazzling ideological twists and turns are not located in the geopolitical protocols, but in the hardware and software of the tools that are used to bring these to a global audience. So before Amédi Coulibaly went into the Paris Hyperculture supermarket to shoot 4 people on January 9, 2015 and take a number of hostages, he recorded a video of himself at home. In the video, Coulibaly sat with his semi-automatic rifle. The wall behind him was covered with a white bedsheet. In lieu of the monumental black metal band-sized backdrops of Al-Qaeda fame, an A4-size printout of the ISIS logo was taped up to the sheet. It's actually A3 if you look carefully. Months earlier, Koulibaly had been in the south of France to train with an extremist preacher accompanied by his girlfriend, Hayat Boumediene, who could be seen practicing with the crossbow whilst wearing a full Islamic veil, and who was since flown to Istanbul and disappeared tracelessly into Syria. Indeed, the section is an attraction of ISIS, who recruit the majority of their volunteers from Western liberal democracies, as hard to deny as they are to explain. ISIS, M&Ms, ISIS, M&Ms, ISIS, M&Ms, M&Ms, ISIS, M&Ms, ISIS, M&Ms, ISIS. It's not our invention. There is a Dutch ISIS fighter who's known on social media for loving M&Ms and ordering like big bags full of M&Ms. And according to the scholar Mariam Mona Lisa Garavi, who we interviewed for the video, there is a particular dynamic at work where the presence of M&Ms enhances the otherness of ISIS, and there's an interplay between the kind of mimetic, almost the emoji of the M&M, and then the strangeness and otherworldliness of ISIS. And this is really, really interesting, we think so. Right. And of course, the West is also trying to fight ISIS militarily. Under the soft power is always the hard power. The cinematic production which best captures the current moment, the moment of After Effects, is a sequel of Hunger Games films. The series presents an Orwellian future state where teams of randomly picked youth are obliged to fight each other to the death in a Truman Show-style arena that encompasses a Tarkovskian wilderness. Mark Fisher has argued that Hunger Games contains the seeds of a communist solidarity through, for example, the Mockingjay whistle that becomes a hidden sign of among collaborating fighters, and later, the anthem of a full-scale resistance movement led by Katniss, the girl who has won the 74th edition of the Hunger Games. The rebels prepare Katniss for her appearance as their lead celebrity, and as she gets prepped and styled, her personal art director says that now everyone wants to kiss you, kill you, or be you. Consequently, they are testing Katniss against different apocalyptic digital backgrounds, convinced that the battle will be won by the video and not by the fight. So, the escalating logic of visual, syntaxic, and semantic portfolios of Western mainstream media are most apparent when it comes to their coverage of the wildfires of global threats, be it biological agents like Ebola, climate change like tsunamis, or dangerous geopolitical opponents like ISIS, previously also Iran, and always with a touch of Camp North Korea. The mutually infectious adjectives, the permeable walls of fear building in one now famous broadcast, CNN referred to Ebola as dubbing it the ISIS of biological agents, conflating categories of enmity in the buildup of a totalizing antagonism of a new type of body snatcher. And in March 2015, the workings of these escalating rhetorics are exposed as Republican Senator Ted Cruz warns his audience at a speech that with Obamacare and current US foreign policy, and especially in their vicious combination, the world is on fire. and a child in the audience bothers to take his words seriously and literally. Scared, she asks if the world is really on fire, to which Cruz replies, "Yes, your world is on fire." Right, so a media critique is needed. That's clear. But RT's media critique entails that to every event, real or imaginary, there is a Russian perspective. In itself true, however, this is taken to a further point where amidst those different viewpoints, amongst which the Russian perspective, to the detriment of the Western perspective, it is impossible to establish what the truth really is. So, for example, this forest is not in Ukraine. That strange habit of presenting a perspective that is at odds with all the other explanations, often demonstrably false, is more than an artful form of deceit. It is a deceitful form of art. And now I'm going to quote a little bit, very short, don't worry, from Tolstoy's What is Art? Art begins when one person, with the object of joining another or others to himself in one and the same feeling, expresses that feeling by certain external indications. To take the simplest example, a boy, having experienced, let us say, fear on encountering a wolf, relates that encounter, and in order to evoke in others the feeling that he has experienced, describes himself, his condition before the encounter, the surroundings, the wood, his own lightheartedness, and then the wolf's appearance, its movements, the distance between himself and the wolf, etc. And all this, if only the boy, when telling the story, again experienced the feelings he had lived through and infects the hearers and compels them to feel what the narrator had experienced, is art. If even the boy had not seen a wolf, but had frequently been afraid of one, and if, wishing to invoke in others the fear that he had felt, he invented an encounter with a wolf and recounted it so as to make his hearers share the feelings he experienced when he feared the wolf, that also would be art. And this citation is the one that we have actors rehearse so that we can see if they can act in the sprawl. So it's quite difficult. But the point of the citation is that it need not to be have happened to be art. So a Kremlin spin doctor said that objectivity is a myth that they impose on us. This was preceded by the allegation that media like the BBC are not objective. There is some substance to this argument in that the BBC and others are objective within the boundaries of their world. That is, the balance on current events is inevitably struck with the interest of the maintenance of the broadcaster's frame of reference and power balance in mind. And RT seem to be called in solely to expose this and thus unfold a Tarkovskian plot over the media matrix that is at the heart of Western capitalist democracies. The Russian perspective is the brick thrown through the window of perspective itself, an existential question posed at all media and all mediation. Image is truth with an edge. Perhaps the rule book of the 21st century is not so much the social contract, code of conduct, international law, or order that states have agreed upon in treaties and partnerships. It is maybe a force that seeks to gain, in the absence of any common ground with the opponent, yet from a deep intimacy with their mind, their desires, and their fantasies. Multiple worlds, entirely differently structured and ideologically built, overlap the same space. The geopolitical master plan is a giant virtual reality helmet, a somehow already augmented reality where it is no longer possible to separate fiction from fact, lie from truth. Geopolitics, once determined but perhaps never predictably by the rule book written by the division of planetary surface into nation states, seems now torn by this not unprecedented but never so intensely experienced escalating regime where the image is the fight and the image is also art. Thank you.